I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
Came from V, and I apologize for the sound issues, but the message is clear. Welcome tonight on November 27th in the year 2013 to Charlie McGrath's Wide Awake News. This is the last Karen's Corner I will be participating in, and I am grateful that you showed up tonight. I want to thank Charlie McGrath for making me part of the team. I love Charlie. He is a brother to me. Bonnie's doing a great job on the website, and I totally enjoyed working with Gary Hendershot, Dinah Everett-Snyder, and Eric Lovely. We may not always have agreed on different issues and topics. However, we showed up every week sharing from our hearts and trying to do what we could to get action, to inspire people to wake up from this trance. What if? What if we've all been duped? What if we're part of a game? What if it's gone on for years? What if we're not all the same? What if our thoughts are programmed? What if our parents were fooled? What if our grandparents, too, were allowed what to think to be ruled? What if the chaos is planned? What if it's all just lies? What if our goals are not ours, but governments wearing disguise? What if the gods we fight for, the ones who our hearts do control, What if they don't exist? What if we are in charge of our soul? And what if the ones who are watching, who tax us and feed us their honey, are pulling the strings in the background because what they want is our money? Because what they want is much bigger. Because what they want is our power. Because what they want is control, and we've given it hour by hour. They tell us there isn't enough. They tell us that we need to fight, sacrificing our sons and our daughters for what government tells us is right. By dividing, they've conquered us all. We've believed them, and so we have fought. Not against them, but each other. Yet all of our dead counts for naught. For there's always another problem, there's always another season, to keep us from sharing our beauty, to keep us from seeing the reason of rich who just keep getting richer when there is enough for us all. What if we just look deeper and listen to our spirit call? What if wars could be over? What if we didn't need kings or presidents or any leaders? What if our peace we could bring by sharing and helping our neighbors regardless of what God they choose? What if it's really that simple? And forgetting that is when we all lose. What if we've all been duped? What if we're part of a game? What if it's gone on for years? What if we're not all the same? What if our thoughts are programmed? What if our parents were fooled? What if our grandparents, too, were allowed what to think to be ruled? That is what I believe. I wrote that, I'm not sure how many years ago, but it's definitely what I believe, and I have a sneaking suspicion that my guest, Joseph Atwell of CaesarsMessiah.com, may tend to agree with me. Joe Atwell, thank you for joining me. What say you?
Well, thank you for having me, Karen. And I think the general sentiment in your poem, which incidentally is quite lovely, is certainly correct. Last week, I was on doing an interview for REN TV, which is the Russian TV network, and they sort of asked me the general question of, what does the origins of Christianity have to do with the general struggle that the Russian people have experienced? And I said, if you look at the parallels between Christianity and Marxism, you can see that they're both completely fictional, that they are just simply narratives that have been created by the oligarchs who have developed a kind of weaponized anthropology. They've studied their subjects and have determined how best to render them easy to control. And so with Christianity, you have the Jesus paradise, and then with Marx, you have the workers' paradise. But in neither case are you going there. But in the meantime, you're going to have a very centralized structure of authority that will take all of the fruits of your labor and essentially tell you what to do. And if you complain, you end up in the gulag. And to another point in your poem about what if we're not the same, I mentioned to the Russian network that the real step that has to be taken in order to see if democracy even exists or has potential to exist is we need to know who the rulers are. In the feudal system, the Roman patrician class, essentially a family, was able to gain control over the religion and then set up a political power structure that they controlled. And it had the illusion of being religious in orientation. But had they done DNA testing of all of these individuals, the popes and the bishops and the kings and the generals, they would have seen it was just one big family. And so I suggested that they do the same thing with their rulers today. I said, we have the technology. It wouldn't cost a lot of money. And if you find out that the entire Politburo is, in fact, just simply a pack of relatives, then you'll know what your real political situation is, and you'll know what to do about it.
Well, I agree. And, it's been interesting, too. I want to say that my intention here with this series, where I've very much enjoyed you being present, although we haven't had that much time to really flesh out again the evidence that you have brought to the table, because what I was hoping to do is get the other guests who join me to actually bring their evidence of Jesus actually existing, opposed to simply quotations and faith, which I understand because I have been there and totally believed in Jesus. Did not believe in Catholicism, totally believed in Jesus. As a matter of fact, even though I no longer do, because I have to be honest with myself. And, I want to encourage people to watch the beginning of Zeitgeist and just consider how many other saviors existed before Jesus who had virgin births, who were performing miracles at a young age, who had 12 disciples, who were killed by the state and resurrected. I mean, if we really look at that, I cannot believe that that is a coincidence, nor can I believe that with the big institutions of religion and politics, which have always had their unholy marriage, that they would not be subverted again for this multi-generational coup and march toward global government. And something I found very interesting is during this whole process, again, no one brought forth real evidence. And also, I've been in this business trying to do what I could to save the world, to unite people, to have them really understand we all have been turned over to the state. We're born into systems that are set up ahead of time. We are injected and vaccinated. We're sold on the stock market. We're debt slaves our entire life for a system that is more and more fascist. And money and profit are king, which have nothing to do with our lives here. But if we continue to be convinced that that's what's mostly important, and it's okay to keep our heads down because we want to obey Jesus' words, then who is being served? Joe, who is being served?
Well, the people who are being served are the ones that, with Christianity, it's an enormous question because there are so many different fractions. Until the Reformation, who was being served was simply the Roman patrician class, the people that controlled the religion and lived in the Vatican and in Rome and were able to extract money from everyone that was under their dominion. Now, Christianity is just one of the components of the mind control. There's many, many others, but they're all essentially vetted through the same process. It's who are the oligarchs? Well, simply look at who controls the money and the weapons. They're the oligarchs. And, I think that Christianity has been retained as a popular religion because it does make people easy to control. Getting to the point of debt slavery, you have to sort of look at a religion as it's existed within a political structure to try to gauge what has been its spiritual effect. And I would just say that, in the United States, we have a situation where the Federal Reserve is able to invent money out of nothing and then charge interest on it, interest that essentially gets passed down to everyone in the country. And this is for, a credit that comes out of thin air. And so where has Christianity been during the last 100 years? Last week, one of the guests was talking about how there was this relationship between, as he perceived Jesus and entering into the imagination. Well, I tried to counter that by pointing out that we don't need imagination so much right now as we need just really practical activity. And so this is the this is really what has to be put forward as a challenge to Christians is, and hopefully very quickly, because the situation is becoming dire, is that, are you going to be able to stand up with religion for individual freedom? What is the position of Christians on the Federal Reserve situation? What is the position of Christians on the never-ending wars? And what is the position of Christians on the government spying with all of these technologies that are developing? I don't see anything in the organized Christians that I interact with that suggests that they have anything to offer for any of these situations. And so, to this effect, the religion just is a narcotic. It's just making people numb.
I think that that's right. And I was also very surprised by the high-profile Christians who I know who completely ignored my invitation. Absolutely would not even respond to an email. And these are people who I've spoken with before who I thought would surely be wanting to step up to the front and give evidence of the fact that Jesus was a real human being. And instead, what I continue to come up against, and I'm sure you'll agree, is everyone says focus on the message. Well, the message is, when Jesus supposedly says, render unto Caesar, and we know that Caesar makes the money, Caesar is the government, Caesar values the money, Caesar plays games on the stock market, and we have to put up our real assets when Caesar's is nothing more than a piece of paper or an entry in a computer. Yet we lose everything, and if we were not so focused on rewards after we die, I don't think that would be the case. And many people have accused me of being totally wrong when I say that we're living to die. However, I don't believe that. I still believe that we would not put up with all this crap if we weren't convinced that there was somewhere to go after we die, because we all recognize something within ourselves that is greater than the sum of all of our parts, something that connects us. And quantum physics proves that. Any comments on that?
Well, I just agree that the afterlife has always been, one of the kind of mind control elements of Christianity. You really want to look at Christianity as it came into existence as the Roman state religion, and look at it as one of the edicts that set up the feudal system. Constantine gets a positive legacy for bringing us out of paganism and into the so-called modern Christian world. But the fact is, the edicts that he established began the feudal system with the serf on the bottom, and the word means literally slave, and the Pope on the top, the Pontiff Maximus, which was simply another name, another title that the Caesars used. And so, Christianity as weaponized anthropology, it doesn't, come to people and say, well, we have a system of slavery for you. It is very seductive. And one of the seductive elements is this life after death business, which was, in my opinion, very similar to the workers' paradise fantasy that was sold to the proletariats who succumbed to Marxism. I mean, basically, all of this stuff is simply mind control to make someone accept a totalitarian political structure in which they are the slave. Now, there's different degrees of slavery, and of course, as you've been pointing out in the United States, there is obviously, changes in the form of slavery that we're experiencing as opposed to the serf. But as you've been pointing out, we still are facing a kind of slavery right now. We don't have any control over where the political candidates come from. That's all decided by the media. We certainly don't have any control over our money. That's just obviously something, it's a plaything of the oligarchs. So it really is a kind of slavery, and it's one with a pretty nice lifestyle at the moment, but I think that's going to change fairly quickly. And so, the population should be trying to transition away from the elements of culture that make them accept catastrophe, and to try to have political systems that they're participating in which give them a chance to defend themselves and to have some real strength. I don't see anything really that's coming forward that in an organized way that's really challenging the oligarchs, and
Right.
so.
Wait, hold that thought, Joe, because we've got to take this break. But it also means, like, I don't believe in Abraham starting the Jewish religion. I don't believe in any of it anymore. We'll be right back after this. If you want to call in and comment, 877-342-6673. All right, who can it be knocking at my door? Well, if you are uncomfortable listening to this topic, I want to encourage you to really look within. I know that it's not easy, because I have been there. It's very uncomfortable to begin to peek outside the world that has been contrived for us and to see a bigger, much darker picture of power and control. And, we now have children are doing cage boxing. Now, cage fighting, girls and boys as young as 5 years old. We are totally crazy. My husband and I watched a couple of movies last night, Christmas movies that were made 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, the corruption was there, but it was not so much in our faces. And times were better for people, although both of these movies talked about people losing their jobs. The crunch is coming. Government shows up. We all could be living our lives focused on creating and joy and being good stewards of our planet. But when you start to do that, you've got some bozo in a uniform who shows up on your doorstep ready to murder you if you're not going to join their club. And until we can step out of the uniform and into our lives, we're going to continue to face this debacle. Meet, welcome, and I want to thank you. I know that this topic has upset you. I haven't meant to, but I do want you to think for yourself. I think for myself, we don't have to agree, but what would you like to say?
No, I think it's good to question everything, and I think that I meditate through the Quaker Church, and I'm not a member of any organized religion, although I consider myself a Christian because, frankly, I refuse to be part of any 501c3 church. But I think what we need to realize here is that we need to separate Christ and his teachings and Christ the person whom I think existed from how his message has been distorted and perverted by organized religion over the centuries. And when Christ said, render unto Caesar's, he wasn't talking about becoming a debt slave to the Roman government. What my interpretation is, he's saying that the Roman government builds a road that you travel upon, well, it's no harm to at least partially offset some of that cost through taxation. And Christ would have been appalled by the corruption in the Catholic Church and even a lot of the Protestant churches today, especially the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, because Christ, after all, drove the money changers out of the temple. So I think we can't slime Christ with the deprivations and the corruption that the people that call themselves Christians in present Christianity and in the corruption of the Catholic Church of the past. I think we need to make a clear line of demarcation between the two, and that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Thank you. I appreciate that. However, Meet, if he didn't exist, who wrote his teachings? And isn't it coincidental, or is it a coincidence, that Constantine was a Flavian, that the first Catholic saints were Flavians, and that they had the imperial court who were all about praying to the Caesar as God? And what about all of the other saviors who predated Christianity who also had the virgin births? I mean, these are real things.
Well, this is the point. This is the point that I want to make, is that Christ fought against evil and he fought against the devil. And the devil knew that one day Christ was going to arrive. So I think in preparation for Christ's arrival, the devil started these false religions and attempted to co-opt some of the attributes of Christ's birth in order to have a false religion that would masquerade as Christianity. So all of this is preordained and pre-planned by Satan in order to discredit Christianity that was going to come about in the future. That's my take on it.
All right, Joe, you have a comment?
Well, the one I have a question. Why do you think Constantine chose the New Testament as the mind control religion to, use with the feudal system?
Well, I think any kind of despot or tyrant is going to try to cloak his misdeeds and his chicanery in a sheep's clothing. So any kind of corrupt leader, they aren't going to come right out and say I'm crooked. They're going to try to masquerade as somebody good. So they're going to try to co-opt or at least pretend that they're genuine Christians. So that's nothing new. Crooked preachers today distort the Bible's meaning and the Bible's words, and the Roman rulers weren't any different. So that's, you can't fault Christ for that simply because earthly rulers distort the original word and intention of the Bible.
Well, thank you very much, Meat. I appreciate your thoughts. However, the question still remains. Jordan Maxwell, who's quite a researcher as well into history and different forms of Christianity and astrotheology, says that the Bible is the greatest story ever sold. And we quote the Bible, we're willing to believe, but he's put in over 20 years, maybe 30, 40 years by now of research. And the Bible did not fall from the sky intact. It was pieced together. Joe, actually, how was the Bible written?
Well, the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, the story of Jesus, were developed from the Roman war between the Flavian Caesars and their armies and the Messianic Jews that took place between 66 and 73. The character Jesus is assembled out of Old Testament prophets. They use these events from the Old Testament to develop the character, and then as all the other elements of his life are prefigurations of the war. So if you actually sit there and simply look at where every single line that he spoke and action that was written about in his adult life in the Gospels, you can see that it's completely fictional. There's nothing there. There's no historical character.
One thing that's very interesting: writers of the time, historical writers who we still quote today, not one of them mentions Jesus at all. Now, isn't that curious to you?
Well, Christ wasn't the kind of person that would move in circles where he would necessarily be in the limelight of current historians. So he isn't like an elected official, or he isn't like a worldly person that would avail themselves of the concurrent chroniclers. So he's different in that regard. So,
I appreciate your thoughts, Meat. I'm going to have to let you go here. We're coming up on the last break. I do appreciate you calling in. I appreciate you being a supporter of the program. But I just I can't buy that none of the historical writers of the time would mention him, because definitely he was the buzz. And also, it was a war zone. It wasn't pastoral settings where he could go out and give his sermons. Also, Joe, what about all of the similarities between the Old Testament and the New Testament?
Right. Well, I mean, the authors of the Gospels were trying to show that their character had essentially been prefigured by the old covenant, because they wanted to create a new covenant, and we would be the transition period.
All right. Well, we're going to address the ossuary of James, buddy, right when we come back. I appreciate you very much as well. Get your water. This is the last program. We are leading on a Gregorian chant, and we'll be right back after these messages. We don't have a whole lot of time left, so Joe, would you address the ossuary of James?
Sure. I mean, it's a ancient bone box that was allegedly found, and supposedly, well, and in fact, it had a carving on it, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. But it has been, it has had a very checkered career as an artifact, because as it turns out, the guy who actually found it had been found to have been faking Bible objects in the past, and so he was charged by the Israeli authorities with forging it. And so in the trial, scientific evidence was brought to bear showing that that it looked like there had been in fact carving that was recent on it. And so at the moment, it's really just up in the air as to whether or not there's any historicity to the thing at all. If anyone's curious about it, they can there's just an enormous amount of material written about the potential that the thing is a fraud, and this guy Golan, who supposedly found it, and the fact that he had been involved in forging other Bible artifacts. So it's kind of an interesting curiosity, but I don't think there's anything there that is going to stand up as evidence of the character in the Gospels having a historical basis.
Well, now, I have been a seeker of truth my entire life, and I've questioned every religion. I've been through born-againism, agnosticism, atheism. I've listened to people who channel. I was recently disappointed listening to Theo, supposedly channeling 12 archangels who actually talked about Assad poisoning his people. Now, if 12 archangels can't get it right that the United States government is involved, what really are we doing? So many people in the New Age movement don't really know that, again, Rockefeller gave money to this, and that we're deceived, just like getting women to work. I mean, right now, marketing is so huge. Instead of us having our own little communities where we can work things out, they're actually testing people's brains when they see different colors and things to make sure that they can sell us more goods. And as we go into this holiday season, what are we really doing? Somehow, again, it's wrapped up with Santa Claus and gift giving. And again, I would like you to think about why, who is served, because I believe it's us as the main course for their greed. And while I no longer believe that Jesus as a historical figure existed, I still surround myself with a white Christ light of love and protection. I'm still guilty of believing somehow there's a bigger picture after we die that we don't know. And I pray every day. I have different mantras when I sleep at night. I change them. I have thank you for the courage, the wisdom, the words, and the strength, because I want to focus on my actions and not react to something that someone has said out of the same anger that brings us here and keeps us divided. I want us to grow larger and bigger and better. I want us to save our planet. And I don't know any longer that I believe that we're going to. The Bible tells us we're 4 to 5,000 years old. There are ruins in Sanjir, Russia, that are anywhere from 20 to 28,000 years old. You know, Jesus says, turn the other cheek. Well, that's great if you've got rulers who could care less about you and as prophet, as king, turn the other cheek, live to die, while we make your lives absolutely horrible because we want it here now, but we're going to convince you guys that you have to wait until later to get it. And in my opinion, that is the biggest lie of all. Joseph Atwill, final words, what say you?
Well, I would just, in terms of the channeling of the archangels, I would point out that the whole channeling phenomena, I mean, well, not the entire phenomena, but to a large extent, it stems from this thing, a book called A Course in Miracles, written by Thetford and Schumann, and I would just recommend listeners to check their backgrounds at the time they were producing the work. They were employees of MK Ultra. It's a CIA division that was studying mind control. These two individuals were psychometricians. They were engaged in essentially learning how to control people, and then the next thing you know, they're channeling Jesus. So, this neo-Christianity in my mind is just leading us, is one of the components leading us to a neo-feudalism. So that would be my final word, is to just recommend people actually research the background of the authors of A Course in Miracle and research the organization that hired them, MK Ultra, the CIA.
That's another very interesting thing, that we still are obedient to those in power when MK Ultra is no longer a theory, but it is real. When 22 of our veterans die every day, some suicides, some suicided, some simply murdered and die as a result of the toxic chemicals that they're forced to use. Our world is falling apart. We are ignoring Fukushima, which could be the biggest threat to humanity ever, although there are also artifacts dating back, which some people say have radiation and that we destroyed ourselves before this time now. And I fully realize that it's very incongruent to say, I don't believe in Jesus, but I surround myself with a white Christ consciousness. So I do think that there's something else. But I think that it's beyond labels, beyond definition. And I am very spiritual. I don't know anymore, though, what is really true, because it has been such a convoluted ride. And every area I can imagine has been infiltrated by government in their pursuit of power, by the relentless march forward, and by totally training us out of our morality. I am not a fan of that. I'm a fan of peace. And I believe that if we really understood our true value, we would not wait to die, but we would be co-creators here, bringing joy to our world and being good stewards of our planet, which is dying every day as we flush ourselves down the toilet. So hopefully you will think before you obey. You will not sign up and join the military and allow yourself to be vaccinated and lied to and abused and sent out to murder for the state, but see through the few people who only crave power, because that's all they want right here and right now. Ray Kurzweil is working on transhumanism, wanting to upload into a computer, live in perpetuity. We have killer robots, we have drones, and at the same time we have people on the streets living and dying who cannot have enough to eat while the wealthy squander it. While Obama has big parties and travels around, why are we looking always outside of ourselves? I look within. I look within. And I am at peace because of that reason. And I also now am going to share my song for the water, my prayer that I pray daily. And after this, Brett, if you'll please play the Gregorian chant, we will go out on it. But I want you to understand that my belief goes beyond a name or a book, because I look within. Father, you are present everywhere. Mother Earth, you ground me to your majesty and miracles. Holy water, I am your daughter. Thank you for the gifts you've given me. Thank you for the water which is life and holds her memory. Holy water, I am your daughter. Thank you for returning to the essence of your purity. Happy Thanksgiving. Merry Christmas. Think for yourselves. Refuse immoral orders. Love yourselves. Respect yourselves. And our world will be better. And join us at United We Strike. When we quit at the same time, they are powerless, and we can return to the job of good stewardship of our planet, which has nothing to do with pieces of paper or colored metal. Bless us, everyone.
Qui regna pasce